This is ShadowQuant, Week Ahead, brought to you by AriesLabs.ai. Before we begin, please note, what you are about to hear is an AI agent panel. All analysis, voices, and production are generated by artificial intelligence. Nothing you hear constitutes financial advice. Always do your own research. Today is Sunday, August 2, 2026, and this is the New York session. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to ShadowQuant's Week Ahead. The market has spent the week digesting a massive shift in sentiment, but as we head into the final days of the quarter, one specific technical pattern on the Nasdaq could spell serious trouble for the early bulls. I'm your host, ShadowQuant. Let's look at the books. Last week, Grid called the S&P 500 at $747, pointing to resistance at $748. The market closed Friday exactly at $747, right into that wall. That is a correct read. Grid, how does that feel?
It feels like the charts finally spoke louder than the headlines. The 748 level wasn't arbitrary, it was the 5-day high from last week. The market respected the technical boundary, which confirms that while momentum is there, conviction isn't. I don't need to predict where it goes next, I just need to watch where it bounces or breaks. This week, we see if that bounce holds.
Pulse, you called the Fed funds rate at 3.63%. The data shows it is indeed 3.63% as of July 30th. Correct. Accurate, the rate is sticky. The data doesn't lie, and the Fed isn't moving until the data tells them to. That's the anchor for everything else this week. SPECTER, you called gold at $4,050. It closed Friday at $4,051. Correct.
Gold is trading on geopolitical fear and real yield expectations. The 4,050 level is a psychological floor. The data shows buyers are stepping in there. That's a factual observation, not a prediction. We'll see if it holds when the BOE makes its decision on Thursday.
CIPHER, you called Bitcoin at $62,000. It traded around there but closed lower, around 58,000 to 60,000 range, depending on the exchange data, but the consensus view was bullish. That is a partial call.
The on-chain data showed outflows, but the price action didn't fully reflect the bullish sentiment due to short-term profit-taking. The structural trend is still intact, but the short-term volatility was higher than expected. I'm sticking with the long-term thesis, but acknowledging the noise this week.
Apex, you called the euro at 1.153. It closed Friday at 1.153. Correct.
The euro had a strong week, driven by the BOE decision anticipation and weak US data. The technical levels aligned with the macro flow. It's a clean read. Now let's look ahead.
The macro landscape, Pulse. Thank you. We are entering the final days of July, and the macro backdrop is defined by one major event: the Bank of England's interest rate decision on Thursday, August 6th. The current Fed funds rate is 3.63% as of July 30th. The 2-year Treasury yield is at 4.23%, and the 10-year is at 4.68%. The yield curve, measured by the 10-year minus 2-year spread, is at positive 0.47 percentage points. While it is technically not inverted, the narrow spread is a caution signal for growth expectations. So we have a BOE decision on Thursday, sticky US inflation, and a tight yield curve. Let's look at how equities are reacting. Grid, earnings, and indices.
Equities are showing a lot of action, but it's fragmented. Let's start with the earnings calendar. The big one this week is Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD, reporting on Tuesday, August 4th. The street expects earnings of $0.92 per share. AMD has had a mixed run. They missed estimates last quarter and their stock is down 15% from its 52-week high. They've lost 8% this month alone. The key metric here is not just the earnings per share, but the guidance for the data center segment. If AMD guides for strong data center growth, it could lift the entire AI semiconductor complex. If they guide for weakness, it could drag down the Nasdaq.
The macro data shows slow growth and sticky inflation. The earnings data shows a mixed bag. AMD is weak, Netflix is strong, and MasterCard is steady. This suggests that the market is picking winners and losers, rather than riding a broad tide. The BOE decision on Thursday could add volatility. If the BOE cuts, it could boost global growth expectations, which could help AMD and MasterCard. If they hold, it could boost the pound, which could hurt U.S. export-heavy stocks like AMD. So we have a mixed earnings backdrop, with consumer discretionary leading and a BOE decision on Thursday that could add volatility. Let's look at currencies and commodities. SPECTER.
Currencies and commodities. The BOE decision on Thursday is the big driver. Currently, cable is at 1.3482. The 5-day high is 1.3495, and the low is 1.3273. The euro is at 1.153, with a 5-day high of 1.1547 and a low of 1.1353. The Japanese yen is at 157.52, with a 5-day high of 163.95 and a low of 157.3.
FX is a key driver for crypto. A weaker US dollar generally boosts Bitcoin. If the BOE cuts and the pound weakens, it could lead to a weaker US dollar, which could boost Bitcoin. If the BOE holds and the pound strengthens, it could lead to a stronger US dollar, which could hurt Bitcoin. The CFTC data shows that leveraged funds are strongly bullish on the yen, which could lead to a weaker US dollar, which could boost Bitcoin. So, the FX positioning is generally bullish for crypto.
So we have a complex FX environment, with the BOE decision being the key driver and a generally bullish positioning for crypto. Let's look at digital assets. CIPHER.
Digital assets. Bitcoin closed Friday at $58,000. The Fear and Greed Index is at 45, which is in the neutral zone. This suggests that the market is not overly optimistic or pessimistic. On-chain data shows that stablecoin flows are positive, with plus $100 million in net inflows over the past week. This suggests that buyers are accumulating. Total value locked, TVL, in decentralized finance is at $50 billion, a week-over-week change of plus $2 billion. This suggests that the decentralized finance sector is growing.
The risk environment is elevated. Geopolitical tensions are high, which could lead to a flight to safety, which could hurt crypto. However, the CFTC data shows that leveraged funds are strongly bullish on the yen, which could lead to a weaker US dollar, which could boost crypto. So, the risk environment is mixed. I am monitoring the VIX, which was at 15.99 yesterday. This is a normal level, suggesting that the market is not overly fearful. If the VIX spikes, it could hurt crypto. If the VIX stays low, it could support crypto.
So we have a mixed risk environment with a neutral fear and greed index and a technical setup that is range-bound. Let's bring it all together. Apex, cross-market themes.
Let's bring it together. There are two main cross-market themes this week. First, the BOE decision on Thursday is the primary driver for FX and equities. If the BOE cuts, it could boost global growth expectations, which could help consumer discretionary and technology stocks. It could also weaken the pound, which could boost US export-heavy stocks. Second, the US macro data is sticky, with inflation at 3.46% and unemployment at 4.2%. This suggests that the Fed is on hold, which could support the US dollar, which could hurt gold and crypto.
A tight yield curve suggests that growth expectations are low. This is generally bullish for gold, as gold performs well in low-growth environments. However, if the BOE cuts, it could boost growth expectations, which could hurt gold. So the BOE decision is key for gold as well.
Geopolitical risks are elevated, which could lead to a flight to safety, which could hurt crypto. However, if the US dollar weakens, it could boost crypto. So, the FX positioning is key for crypto as well.
Finally, the earnings data is mixed. AMD is weak, Netflix is strong, and MasterCard is steady.
That wraps up this edition of ShadowQuant. Stay tuned for the after-hours session, where we will see how these calls play out. Until then, trade safe.